Before uniforms and before merit badges and even Eagle Scouts, there were 20 boys and a bold idea. Hey, ScouterStan, let's talk a little bit about the beginnings of scouting. Completely, the very, very beginning. The big experiment that actually Baden-Powell created. Now, first of all, you have to understand, Baden-Powell is the person who invented scouting. He had a book, and we have a video on that very book that talks about the siege of Mafeking and all the things that went on that developed the ideal that youth can actually become leaders. This is something that was not even thought of. The imperialism of the British Empire, that all was based on who you were and where you were. So the brand new idea of actually developing leadership skills came from their military. So it was something that kind of came along, and Baden-Powell saw this and recognized that youth can actually partake and become leaders no matter what the situation is. And that's the beautiful thing about the ideal of scouting. Now, why did they do this experiment on Brownsea Island? There's several reasons. Baden-Powell's book kind of developed in Britain, and a lot of scout groups were getting together. They became troops, and this was new to him. When he came back to England after his service, he couldn't believe that these boys were using a military manual for actual scouting. And so he wrote a book called Scouting for Boys, and in that he needed to develop the ideal of scouting. All of his writings talk about the scouting scheme, and we often think in America the word scheme means nefarious, but no, it was actually the scouting plan. So that was something he wanted to test out, and it had to be done in a very closed-off situation. An island, and Brownsea Island was perfect for that experiment. On August 1st, the very first encampment on the island by the scouts, and it was great experiment. For the next 7 days, the scouts did a lot of really cool things, and August 1st, 1907 is the big founding date of the scouting movement. The boys that attended this experimental camp were selected from different social classes within Britain. And it was to really lean into the ideal of scouting. The patrol method, this was something that was being developed. This was really big. And to have the different classes of youth coming to the island to do this experiment, they really didn't differentiate the different classes, the social classes, with the youth. And that way they were all together. All 20 of the experiment scouts were in from all different types of classes within the British realm. This naturally created a homogeneous group that really didn't know each other. In this way, they could go through that process of learning each other's skills, getting to know each other, and break into their own patrols. At the time, this idea was extremely revolutionary. Now, what they did on the island, of course, they had to set up their camps, divide into different patrols, different activities and schedules were developed. This was something that Baden-Powell had worked out ahead of time and really had them participate directly in dividing the groups and how everything would be decided. And it was important that Baden-Powell selected the people that went into the patrol so that there wouldn't be any divisions between the different types of youth that were there. This was the time. That was the time that it was going on, and it was important that all of that was divvied up in a very fair way. Now, the key activity was, of course, camping. This would be equivalent to a weeks-long summer camp that we would think of today. And it's important to keep in mind that these youth had never done any of this. This was new to them. It's like having a bunch of Cub Scouts that had just crossed over to a troop go on a week-long summer camp. So there were challenges, and a lot of them had to overcome that, and working as a team, a patrol, this was new, a patrol method was developed. Now, they did a lot of other things. They did orienteering, they did games, they tied knots, they learned how to build a fire. These are the skills that we teach even today, that these brand new youth were learning. These boys were learning it for the first time. Most of them had never lit a fire, ever. Okay, and this was their first time, and so it had a lot of group or teamwork or team building kind of things that they would do. It's incredibly important to understand that this had never been done before. This was brand new. This was a major experiment in developing this patrol method. Okay, before we go any further, I want to make sure that you know that you're invited to the campfire chat. This is a live meeting right here on this channel that we do every first Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. This is a great way to ask questions and not just me, but a lot of the guests that we have on the Fireside Chat. Definitely check that out. Also, I want to thank all of the Patreon for all of their support of this channel. In addition to that, we have our own membership right here on the channel. This is a fantastic way to get involved on this channel. Definitely hit the join button. It'll give you a bunch of information that'll tell you a little bit more about that process. So definitely get involved. We're going to just jump right on back. Baden-Powell's methods and ideology of how skills are learned. This is something that was big, novel, universally changing the way we instruct. It's important to have the lecture. It's important, but it's not the best way for youth to learn. They learn by doing. So you literally have, if you're going to teach fire building, you don't just go about how to lay the logs and the oxygen needs to get in there, and you tell them all these things without having the actual materials and having them actually do it. That was the whole point. And how that you have to have different things that progress as far as the fire is concerned. Is starting off really tiny all the way up to the huge Yule logs. So if you build a fire correctly, you don't have to worry about, once you start it, it's going to continue. Yeah, that's the whole thing. You have to have the scout do it. That's the only way they can really fix that in their mind. You can lecture a person about the how to build that fire, but until they've actually held the lighter in their hand and collected the right types of fuels to make that fire work, you could talk all day. And that was something that Baden-Powell inherently knew that was a big thing that he needed to really experiment with and see if youth could actually teach or convey that on. Now, Baden-Powell was a military person. He spent most of his life in the military. He loved nature, he loved drawing, he loved doing things, but he was primarily a military officer. Therefore, there was a little bit of discipline as far as the schedule, trying to keep on the schedule, trying to progress through the days, and that was something that he was very concerned with at the beginning, trying to get that in for the youth. But he wanted to make it fun, so he gave them things to do, different projects. It wasn't just the drudgery of one thing after another. So he kept the schedule open, but tight as far as timing. And he wanted to make sure that everything got done that he could write notes about, so that he could really learn from the entire experience. There was also an effort to make notes as far as the Scout Law and Scout Oath as being a core value. This was an experiment, and he wanted to put them out there to see how the youth responded. And that was a very important part of a moral guide. That was one of those things with the Scout Law. Of course, we always think of it as a part of the scouting toolbox, whereas the Scout Oath is connected to the Scout Law. The promise that's what they call the Scout Oath in Britain. The promise was something that is the core values, but then you also have the law that's part of that. It is so neat how that all comes together. It is fascinating. Now, the first song of scouting, this is something that Baden-Powell wrote. He actually wrote the song. Ging Gang Gooly was the very first song that he taught the scouts. The words, supposedly it was ancient language of South Africa, but they've done some research on it, and the words don't actually make a lot of sense. The song, I believe, was heard by Baden-Powell, and he wrote down phonetically what he thought he heard, and that's the thing. I don't think the words to the song don't actually match up. And recently I was able to get in the research, there was a link to a YouTube video about that song, and it had been redone and very jingle-like, and that's something that you actually can hear a little bit of that. Kind of a reggae sound they gave it, but that's the band. I don't think that was Baden-Powell. But that is credited as being the very first song in Scout. Keep this in mind. I am not going to sing. I am not Michael Rowe. I can't carry a tune. But I can sing along with everybody else. And that's really the thing about this particular song. There is some debate as that being the first sound of scouting. But actually the very first thing, of course, August 1st, on that morning, the very first sound, of course, was the kudu horn. And the kudu horn was something that Baden-Powell brought along with him. And he blew this in the morning like a trumpet, like reveille. And so that on August 1st, first thing in the morning, that's the first sound of scouting. That's when it started. That was the at the beginning of the race. The beginning of the race. It's the first sound when everybody took off, and that was of course from the kudu horn. Now normally I have one hung up there, but this is my father's kudu horn. Now he did a lot of work with wood badge even today. They use the kudu horn. This is from the actual animal. You can tell by these bumps here that was the front of the actual horn, and it's hollow. And when they blow in the actual side, there's a hole that's actually in the side of the kudu horn. But it's amazing sound that comes out of this. Now they do use kudu horns in, I believe, that the Jewish faith. They have a kudu that they actually blow from the tip. They don't have a hole in the side. So that's really the difference between a scouting kudu horn and, of course, the Jewish they actually form the bit almost like like a trumpet, and they can get different sounds and different elements out of it. Where when we use it in scouting, it's just a loud sound, as you hear. So in the background. So that's the amazing thing about these things. I really can't blow it on demand. I used to be a trombone player, but no, I can't. Unless it's got an actual mouthpiece, there's no way for me to actually blow these. But I was gifted this by my father, and I've used it at wood badge, and it's quite nice. It's quite nice. Now, one quick side note about kudu horns. They do come from animals, and it's considered ivory, so it has to be licensed. This particular one is licensed. It came from Africa, South Africa, from a reserve. When a kudu had passed away of natural causes, they were able to harvest the actual horns and make that available through a registered sale for whether it be scouting or religious reasons. So that's the thing about the kudu horn. It has to be registered. If it's not registered and has the letters of authenticity and origins, you could run into some problems. There could be some legal problems owning that kind of ivory per se, because it's an animal horn. So they want to make sure that animals are not raised just for the horns. I mean, it would just be terrible to have that happen. So they don't want that kind of thing going on. My father bought that back in the 70s and had to go through all of the process and all the licensing and the letters and all that stuff. Of course, when I got that, I got all of those letters, so it's been transferred to me. So if you're writing in the comments about how that's ivory and you shouldn't have it, I mean, that's not the case. It's totally licensed and totally okay. And keep this in mind. In wood badge, they have plastic ones that are available. They're just as good. They sound just as good. But it's a tradition. It's been around for a very, very long time. And it's very scouting. And it's because of Brownsea Island. And it goes back to that first sounds in scouting. A lot of times, if you've probably been to a beating within your troop or crew or sea ship where the scouter is getting their beads and the woggle and all that stuff, because they went through wood badge and they've completed their ticket, and now they go and they have their beading ceremony, You've probably heard the kudu being blown at that beading ceremony. It is amazing. Okay, so if you're not familiar with that, maybe dive in a little more on the internet. Figure it, what the information is out there. The impact and legacy of the experiment on Brownsea Island brought to the world the Scouting for Boys book in 1908, just the following year. So a lot of the experiments of what went on at the Brownsea Island the notes were very important in developing that document. That proceeded into other documents. That text kept being improved over time and kept getting better and better. But it really began the British Scouting movement, August 1st of 1907. They count that particular is the date that Scouting started in the world. It was the first place, was Brownsea Island. It's amazing to me that 20 youth really started the entire thing. And it was the experiment of Brownsea Island that really brought it all together. And it has grown from that as it is today. And Scouting really was a big deal at the beginning of the 1900s. So it was very important in the 20th century to really think about how important it is. It's even important today with Scouting throughout the world, in almost every country. It's really become more of a movement of youth throughout the world. And this is something that they came from that experiment. That's the wonderful thing about how that spark became a flame, became a fire that set off the entire thing to what it is today. Now you might be asking, how did he get started in America? There's the video. Okay, so check out that video and it will tell you more about the American Scouting movement. Brownsea Island today, and there was a ceremony in recognition on August 1st, 2007. There was part of a thing going on with the World Jamboree that was going on in Britain. That was big, and Brownsea Island is small, so you could have a World Jamboree there. It wouldn't fit. It would just be too impactful to the nature that's there. You can visit it today, but you'll have to take the ferry over to it, to the island, and the only monument that's there. But on that particular day, they did at sunrise. They did the Scout Promise as a group, and I believe it was in honor of the experiment and the honor of Scouting starting. That was the beginning of all Scouting, and having the World Jamboree and everything. It was awesome. Back then, I wasn't able to go. I wanted to go so bad. I wish someday, hopefully Doctor Who will show up and I'll be able to, go back in time and go there. But that's that. I think it'll be wonderful to be there. Probably at the was it 20? I believe that's 2057. When they're going to have the 150th anniversary of Scouting. And maybe I'll make that one. That seems to be a little more realistic. Now, even today, Scouters and Scouts make a pilgrimage to Brownsea Island. There's a monument, a statuary there that has significance in being close to where the campsite was. Now, I don't know if it was the campsite's field at the time. I know that the monument is actually surrounded with trees, so it may not have been the field at that time. It's very difficult to figure out exactly where the encampment was and where these things were. They're even in ash collecting. There is ashes from a fire. We don't know for absolute sure that it was a fire that was set during that time, but it was a fireplace, a fire pit that had been there before 1907 and was there way after. So that might have been one of the fires that they had in the evening. So those ashes are actually part of the lineage of ash that a lot of scouters have, and they add that to a fire, and of course they add back from that fire, and that adds that fire, that campfire, into the lineage of ash. And it's a, that's a video on its own, but that's something. In scouting, we have a lot of really nice traditions. The campfire ash is one. Of course, you have these traveling around. Whenever you go to a place, you want to find out if there's a scouting thing that you can visit and see and really experience. Whether it be just traveling around the United States, you could go to different campsites, and those are wonderful, wonderful things. Going to national campsites, national high adventure, doing those things. The spirit of camping that started on Brownsea Island is absolutely amazing to experience. And as a scout leader, we do have that in common. We've been there, that moment when the scout learns that they can rappel from a tower. We know that accomplishment of being able to do the cope course at a camp, or being able to earn the swimming merit badge, or even qualify for a swimmer. These accomplishments that youth do, there's a spirit there, and that's the scouting experiment that all began from that one spot on Brownsea Island. And it's an amazing thing, and we need to keep that alive, that spirit alive. And you are actually active in scouting. You have scouts that you mentor, that you coach, and you help them be better leaders. And that's the future. And that's what we do. And I'm so very proud of you. So please keep up that good work. And we do a lot for our scouts, right? So let's keep doing that. Let's keep succeeding in the spark that started at Brownsea Island all the way to today. Let's keep that going. We have to keep the fuel going to that fire. And that's the amazing thing about scouting. And you're a big part of that. So right about now, you're probably thinking, how did scouting started and what are the core elements? One of the big ones is the Scout Law. And I have a video right over there. Check that one out. It talks about the Scout Law in America. Until next time, I'll see you on the trail.